Okay. So then of course is that there's a lot of like, older couples that
Mhm.
has been together for a long time. And there's a certain patterns, of communication has been set in for a long time, right? And for me, I felt is that like for me, for example, is that one of the things which that no matter what, is going on, there is one thing which that I always have it in the back of my mind is that when you initially met the person and you got married, you were in love, you actually your desire, besides you want yourself to be happy, you want the other person be happy,
Mhm.
right? So then is that, we all, there's, changes in life, work stress, this and that, family, kids stress, and all of that. And also hormonal changes too, during a long time marriage, there's a huge changes going on too, right? So for me was that I always paid a lot of attention of actually is that, what kind of state that each one of us is in, because I notice is that, there are times that, people are just maybe, for whatever reason, being depressed, pandemic hit, this and that, every kinds of reasons, people are just depressed. When it's under that situation, very often, especially when someone is depressed, definitely communication suffers, and I think at this kind of time, is that compassion and all of that really comes in, and with observance and understanding and not taking things personally and seeing of the emptiness behind of everything. I felt that for me, that was one of the things that I observed.
My first inclination when there are big stressors and everything in life and you see communication dwindling and you're unable to do anything about it, my first inclination is marriage counseling. Like, go and learn how to communicate, especially if you've been together for a long time and you have patterns that you feel like are unbreakable or, unchanging, or you feel like you have spent a lot of work on yourself, you grew yourself, and now you're trying to see if this, relationship is able to match up with what's happening, right? That all requires communication. That's the underlying foundation for your entire relationship. So
Okay.
if you guys can't figure out how to communicate, you need to bring somebody into the mix to help you communicate.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that for, this is where the big difference of cultural difference too, like for example, is that in United States, that, like obviously, like kids, especially even when they were growing up, even in school, always there's counselors, there's psychiatrists, psychologists, and all of that, right, to work with them. But, like for example, my age of Chinese people, when we were growing up, we never heard of there's such a thing called a psychologist because we don't have this actually psychiatry, in China. I
Mhm.
mean, of course, on the other hand, is that, that in many ways, like a Buddhist practice, in many ways, it is a psychology. It's just that, of course, that, in our background during the Cultural Revolution and all of that, not even many people, were into Buddhism and all of that too, right? So it becomes a bigger challenge. And I definitely notice is a lot of the Asian families that, especially women, that they don't go and seek help. And also some of the men too, a lot of the men, they don't think they are the one that's having the problem and they don't want to go. They think that to go and seek help is rather is for the benefit of the other person. And they are not understanding actually a lot of the time is that they themselves is suffering, and actually it's more of that understanding what your suffering is.
Yeah, and I would say that, this really comes down to what a person's values are in their relationship or their marriage, right? So let's take the example of like, you know, maybe Chinese women your age or something, right? Maybe they're not so inclined towards divorce because they are content with the things that they gain out of the marriage that are not necessarily what my personal idea of what a happy, healthy relationship is, right? Like, I personally value that, you know, two people in a relationship are choosing the relationship every single day, right? They're prioritizing the relationship. Like, having that kind of love in their life is just, you know, really amplifies everything else in their life, and they feel supported and, you know, happy in that, right? So my idea of what a marriage is and what a relationship is at its best could be very, very different from even your idea of what, you know, a relationship brings you in your life, right? So I understand. I am indifferent to people who choose to have relationships for whatever reason, right? Whether that's just, okay, I know that this person is in the other room and that's enough for me, right? Like, there's just, it's just, it really, you have to look at your values. And if your values do happen to shift, if you do want better communication, you want a better connection, you want, you know, different things, like, then that's when you have to address the idea that, you know, do you really choose that relationship every day? Is your partner really choosing that relationship every day? You know, is there room for you to go down a different path, right? Like, that's just,
I think that culturally and definitely for sure, you know, especially the Asian culture, that is so much emphasis is on like the whole family, you know what I mean, right? Yeah. And I think that there's a huge difference, you know, generation difference, also cultural background difference too, definitely, you know.
yeah, for sure. And I would say, like, even in my relationship and in, you know, other relationships that I see that of people in my generation, you
Mhm.
know, the focus of the relationship is on the relationship itself and kids and family and all of that, right? As long as you have the foundation of the marriage or the romantic relationship, then everything else is malleable and able to, like, you can work with those things because you have that foundation. However, yeah, I think you're right. I think that there is more of a family emphasis and more of like keeping the kids in mind and everything in terms of what people value in your, you know, cultural difference and generational difference.
Yeah, but I do actually want to point out one thing though. So even though, you know, especially of the Asian background, that people emphasize a lot more of the family value, you know, right? Trying to keep the family together, right? But I think actually is that you'll be surprised because especially, for example, of the couples that are in, you know, in a Western society, because their kids are actually brought up in a Western society. They are very much affected by the, you know, different culture. And plus also, I think that disregard of the different culture background, right? I think that for the children, that rather they want to see their parents, each one of them being happy, rather than that they compromise their own happiness for the relationship. And I think that's one of the things that just I would say is that, you know, especially a lot of the people that I have met, I felt that, you know, like somehow that part is not being paid attention to. And in their head, they thought, oh, they're keeping their marriage together for the kids, but they are not actually realizing their kids are not necessarily happy seeing their parents fighting or for whatever reason, you know. And I think that's
Completely agree. Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and I also think that that has a big impact, first of all, on this generation, I think, because, you know, this generation saw a lot of divorce, saw a lot of marriages fall apart, yet still sort of want to maintain status quo, right? So I think there's that. And I also think that this, like, it also unburdens
Mhm.
the children, by being happy in a relationship, whether it's in a relationship or alone, right? Just your parents being happy unburdens the children, which is also something that maybe Asian people especially should understand, because when you take the burden off of the elders being happy, you don't have to take as much care of them when they're older. You know, so like there's a lot of emphasis in Asian cultures of the children taking care of their parents as they get older, right? But when the parents are happy and they actually, you know, have a lot of
They have
life
to be healthy,
figured out,
independent.
right? They tend to be healthier and they tend to have to be less taken care of, you know, and that is a big life impact for the children.
Yes, yes, and I think that's one of the aspect I notice a lot of people are not, paying attention. Like they are not noticing actually is that, they are being independently happy, healthy, actually is the best gift that they can give to their children. And that's what I feel. And I think that that's one of the things that probably a lot of our Asian friends and I felt like that they fail to see that that they have a different picture in their head and but actually they are not realizing is that they themselves not being happy and hang on to the marriage or whatever actually is a burden to the children.
Yeah, and I also feel like, you know, individually being happy and healthy is the greatest thing that you can do for everyone. Like not only your children, it's the best thing you can do for your partner. It's the best thing you can do for the relationship. So that later on you don't resent the relationship for taking away your health and happiness, right? Or you don't blame it just subconsciously. So I also think that it is a huge impact on society. And also just like as you get older, as you're growing older, you're going into your elderly years, being happy, being healthy, not intertwining yourself with your children, right? Because they are at an age where they can worry about stuff, they can figure stuff out. You're at an age where you need to like lose the worries, right? You need to feel free, right? You need to set an example for your kids.
Yeah.
And also, you know, be as unburdened as possible, because inevitably your burdens always become your children's burdens. And we see that, you know, from just developmentally, right? As young children, we're picking up everything from our parents. So this doesn't stop.
Yes, yes, and I felt that one of the best example actually, in many ways is that it doesn't really matter how much that we talk and think, but really is that the greatest impact, that any one of us can have for our children and also for the society and for other people really is that you got to live out of yourself and then in many ways then you can affect others. It's really not about that how successful you become, how like you become a statue of this and that, and you have an impact, and that's really how I feel too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is people's happiness and who they are as people that have the biggest impact in this world.
Yeah.